What up, world? Welcome to Dan Davis, episode 5, Conspiracy Theorist, part 2. I recorded this originally intending it to be one episode, then I realized there was just going to be too much editing. I recorded several different thoughts over the day. I made one little tiny mistake that made me go back and make a correction, which turned out to be even better because it highlights a little better what I'm talking about. And it also foreshadows a little bit of what this vlog is going to turn into. Not in presentation necessarily, but in sourcing. So one other little thing, that caveat that I didn't touch on ever during the day that I was recording this episode originally, is that I know some people are reading and looking at the things I'm talking about, because some of you are doing your business by it. But even sometimes people in their business don't have any real reason to look into a lot of the things that I'm talking about. But really I'm talking about the people, both professional and lay people outside of those areas that don't generally have a reason to look at it if it doesn't have something to do with our job. I think this is going to give a good cross-section of what it is I mean when I'm talking about conspiracy theorists of the type that I'm presenting here. So enjoy and catch the next episode. For all of you people calling a bunch of people conspiracy theorists and calling us stupid, for telling us that we have a crystal ball, no. We've paid attention to this stuff for a long time, and we've been trying to get you to stop a lot of this stuff from happening before it happened. But anytime a lot of us start talking about it, it seems like people get visions of, Red Dawn with people parachuting in. The end of the world is coming, pork and beans run for the hills. No, we're saying look at this policy that is eventually going to turn into this. There are many examples of we quote-unquote conspiracy theorists being correct. And I'll give you some that have happened in my life just here locally. Back in the MySpace days, I remember even saying anything, questioning anything about the potential dangers of genetically modified foods. I remember people that I know personally attacking me, calling me a conspiracy theorist. Through total happenstance, years later, I ended up playing bass for somebody that got invited to the Yes I'm 92 event here in Portland, Oregon, a measure to label genetically modified foods. To me, that's just a pretty basic thing. If you're going to sell us whatever it is that you're going to sell us and not tell us what's in it, yet at the same time call it food, then you don't need to have the legal ability to sell that on the market. That's how I feel about it. But I thoroughly read that piece of legislation. I found that when I showed up, there were some of the people that were calling me conspiracy theorists years before about it had showed up to perform. Cool, I thought. That was the first thing that came to my head. Awesome, we've made some progress. But what I found as I talked to people before and after our performance there to support the bill, I found that there was only one person. I wasn't able to speak to everyone, but I found that there was only one person that I could have a fully versed conversation with about this piece of legislation. Everybody else essentially claimed to have either scanned over it or they read the condensed version of it, but they hadn't actually really fully went out of their way to make sure that they knew that what they were promoting, what they were supporting, was actually something that they 100% knew for a fact for themselves that they agreed with. And I found that same thing years before that in the Million Marijuana March. People marching around saying, I smoke pot and I like it a lot. That's great. But this was supposed to be, medical marijuana, and I'm literally the only person walking down the road with a video camera talking to people about statistics and facts involved in being legal versus being illegal, the impact on society. All these different data points, I'm speaking to people on the street, and everybody else is just walking around in a gaggle saying, I smoke pot and I like it a lot. The pot legalization bill, there was a lot of people all for it, but once again, they didn't actually read through and understand the legislation. I get it. We don't want to get arrested for smoking pot anymore. And that seems like pretty much the only thing anybody cared about, and I understand that, but nobody really read the legislation. It pretty much could have said whatever the heck it wanted to, and you wouldn't know the difference. So I see this sort of thing over and over and over and over and over again. That same year, I believe it was Measure 89. It was a measure to allow military officers to be judges and college professors in the state of Oregon.
Okay. So I knew there was something wrong when I said that. I said Measure 89, and what I actually meant was Measure 87. not going off a teleprompter, I was just going off of memory. So when I went and double-checked myself and looked it up, I searched Google for 2014 Oregon Major allows military officers. I found the direct PDF download link for the voters pamphlet for 2014 from the Oregon Secretary of State's website. And when we review Oregon Ballot Measure 87 from 2014, the explanatory statement says, Ballot Measure 87 would amend the Oregon Constitution to allow state court judges to be employed for the purposes of teaching at public universities and to receive compensation for performing military service in the Oregon National Guard. Currently, Article 3, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution, Separation of Powers Clause, prohibits persons from serving in more than one branch of government at the same time. As one result of this prohibition, state court judges may not be employed as teachers at institutions of public education. Article 2, Section 10 of the Oregon Constitution further prohibits state court judges from receiving compensation for performing military service. So that explanatory statement is saying that the Oregon Constitution prohibits any person from serving in multiple portions of the government at the same time. It couldn't be more clear. So, knowing how illegal that is, the legislative amendment in support of this measure naturally says, the Oregon legislature approved Ballot Measure 87 as a technical fix to the state's constitution to allow state court judges to serve in the military and as teachers at public universities. Oregon's constitution prohibits an individual from simultaneously serving in more than one branch of state government, as they said before. Article 3, Section 1, Separation of Powers Clause. Ballot Measure 87 will allow state court judges, a part of the judicial branch, to serve the Oregon Military Department and Oregon's public universities, which are part of the executive branch. Currently, some court judges volunteer as teachers at public universities, and other judges serve in the Oregon National Guard. State court judges can be compensated by private schools and colleges for teaching, but currently state court judges cannot be paid by public schools. Ballot Measure 87 will ensure that the state court judges can be compensated as teachers at public universities and in the Oregon National Guard, without violating the Separation of Powers Clause of the state constitution. It also rescinds State Joint Resolution 34, which referred to the old structure of higher education. So the translation of all of that, if you didn't catch it, was there are currently judges serving in the Oregon National Guard, judges and in the National Guard at the same time. But what we would very much like you to focus on is these judges potentially teaching your children. And in the very last portion of it, it of course says, Oregon legislature determined that this disparity has led to fewer opportunities for students at Oregon's public universities to interact and learn from experienced jurists. Accordingly, in the interest of affording all of Oregon's students the same benefits, Ballot Measure 87 has been proposed to create equal opportunities at Oregon's public universities. Translation, it's for the children. Ballot Measure 87 also clarifies that those judges who serve as members of the Oregon Military Department may do so. There are judges serving in the military in defiance of constitutional law currently before this measure passed. Ballot Measure 87 will ensure that state court judges can be compensated as teachers at public universities and in the Oregon National Guard without violating the Separation of Powers Clause of the state constitution. It also rescinds State Joint Resolution 34, which refers to the same structure, higher education. So I just wanted to point that out and make that little correction before I continue on my next little tirade. Clearly, we can have a debate about whether or not judges should be teaching in public schools based on many legal and moral principles, but the fact of the matter is, that there were judges serving in the National Guard at a time when they should not have been by constitutional law in the state of Oregon. If I'm totally off on this, please let me know, but it seems clear as day to me.
The legislative recommendation for a yes vote, it specifically said in there that there are judges currently committing this felony right now. And I tried to get people to pay attention. It says in there that the legislature, as far as I understand, is not doing their job of oversight. You're telling us that you know that judges are committing felonies right now. How many are there? And why are you doing nothing about it? Why are you presenting us a piece of legislation that tells us we should retroactively let them off the hook for that? We got Occupy, and now we've got Black Lives Matter and all these people yelling and screaming out in the streets. I mean, yeah, sure, march to bring awareness to it, but then you got to do something about it. And here it is. Everybody, while the pot bill's going on, while the Yes on 92, hey, look at this too, please. Am I wrong in this? Like, nobody would even look at it. People just call me a conspiracy theorist. It's right there in black and white. We could have seriously done something about a major break, seeming break, in our judicial system right here where we live. And deaf ears. Blind eyes, deaf ears. It's supposedly radical to even want to talk about it, and people like me get fervent about it. It's right there in front of your face. Yeah, I've seen it. It happens over and over and over again. We get labeled as quote-unquote conspiracy theorists for knowing what the hell we're talking about because we don't want anybody hurt.